The ship was falling apart around Commander Marcus Cole as he fought with the controls. Trying to pull up before the ground killed him. Fire filled the cockpit and smoke burned his lungs. But he refused to give up, because giving up was not something humans did very well. The planet below was Volanti Prime, home to one of the oldest and most powerful alien empires in the known galaxy. And Marcus was definitely not supposed to crash here. He had been on a simple escort mission when everything went wrong. When ships appeared from nowhere and started shooting. When his convoy scattered like leaves in a storm now. He was alone and falling, and probably about to die on a world where humans were seen as little more than clever animals who had recently learned to walk. Among the stars, the crash was violent and loud and painful. Marcus woke up in the wreckage with blood on his face and fire in his chest and the certain knowledge that several of his ribs were broken. He crawled out of the twisted metal that used to be his ship and collapsed onto strange purple grass that felt like silk against his burned hands. The sky above was orange and filled with 3 moons, and it would have been beautiful if he was not busy trying to breathe. That was when he heard the sound. It was soft and weak and coming from somewhere nearby. A voice speaking words he did not understand in a language that sounded like crystal bells ringing. Marcus pushed himself up despite the pain and followed the sound because he was a soldier and soldiers help people, even when helping might get them killed. He found her behind a cluster of rocks, and she was the most beautiful and terrifying thing he had ever seen. She was Volanti. That much was clear from her crystalline skin and the way light moved through her body. Like she was made of living glass, but she was broken and bleeding, a substance that glowed blue and burned the ground where it fell. She was also holding something against her chest, protecting it with the last of her strength. And when she saw Marcus, she did not scream or attack. She reached out to him with one trembling hand. "Human," she whispered. And somehow he understood her now, perhaps through some translator device, or perhaps through something else entirely. "Please help me." Marcus knelt beside her, even though her blood burned his skin where it touched him. Even though every instinct told him to run. "I am Commander Marcus Cole of the Earth Defense Fleet," he said, his voice steady despite everything. "Tell me what you need." She laughed then, a sad and broken sound that made something in his chest hurt in a way that had nothing to do with his injuries. "I am Empress Sathara of the Volanti Dominion," she said. "Or I was until an hour ago, when my brother decided he wanted my throne more than he wanted me alive." Marcus looked at the wound in her side and knew immediately that there was nothing he could do because it was too deep and too terrible, and she was fading fast. "The egg," she said, and she pushed the object she had been protecting toward him. "This is my daughter, and she is in danger." Marcus looked at the crystalline egg in his hands and saw colors swirling inside it. Soft pinks and warm golds that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. "She is different," the Empress continued, her voice growing weaker. "She is what my people call aberrant, because she feels too much and loves too strongly, and they will kill her for it." "Why give her to me?" Marcus asked. "I am just a human, and your people think we are nothing." The Empress smiled, and there was something ancient and knowing in her dying eyes. "I have watched your species for decades," she said. "I have seen you do impossible things for love, for family, for bonds that make no logical sense. And I need someone who will love my daughter when no one else will." She grabbed his hand with sudden strength. "Promise me, human. Promise me you will protect her and raise her and teach her that feeling is not weakness." Marcus looked at the egg and felt its warmth against his palms and heard something inside it. Something that sounded almost like a heartbeat calling out to him. "I promise," he said. The Empress closed her eyes and her body began to dim, the light inside her fading like a sunset giving way to night. "Her name," she whispered with her last breath. "Let her choose her own name. That is the one freedom I can give her." And then she was gone. Marcus sat there for a long time holding the egg of an alien princess, while the fires of his crashed ship burned behind him and 3 moons watched from the orange sky. He should have felt afraid or overwhelmed or completely out of his depth. But all he felt was the warmth of the egg against his chest and a fierce determination to keep his promise. The next 3 years were the hardest and strangest and most wonderful of his life. He found an abandoned station on a forgotten moon where no one ever came, and he made it into a home. He studied everything he could find about Volanthi biology and development, and he watched the egg with careful eyes as the colors inside grew brighter and more complex. He talked to the egg every night because he had read somewhere that unborn babies could hear their parents, and he figured alien babies might be the same. He told her about Earth and its blue oceans and green forests, about his mother who made the best apple pie in 3 star systems, about the way humans loved each other even when it made no sense. The egg pulsed with warm light whenever he spoke, and Marcus chose to believe she was listening. She hatched on a Tuesday. Marcus had just finished telling her about snow when the egg began to crack and light poured out like sunrise, breaking through clouds. She was small and beautiful, and her crystalline form was pink and gold instead of the cold blue of typical Volanthi. And when she opened her eyes and looked at him, Marcus felt his heart change forever. "Hello, little one," he said softly. "I have been waiting for you." She reached up with tiny hands that sparkled like diamonds and touched his face. And then she spoke her first word, not in the crystal bell language of her people, but in perfect English, in a voice that was small and sweet and absolutely certain. "Father," she said. Marcus felt tears running down his face as he held her close. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes, I am, and I am going to call you Lyra. Like the constellation, like the music, like the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." Lyra smiled, and her whole body glowed with warmth. Somewhere across the galaxy, an empire searched for the aberrant princess who needed to be destroyed. But here on a forgotten moon, a human father held his alien daughter and promised the stars that nothing would ever hurt her. Not while he still had breath in his body. Not while love still burned in his heart. This was the beginning of everything. Lyra grew faster than any human child would have, reaching the size and mind of a teenager in just 3 years, but she was nothing like the cold and distant beings that the Volanthi records described. She laughed at silly jokes and cried during sad stories and threw her crystalline arms around Marcus every morning like she had not seen him in years. She was warmth and light and endless questions about everything. "Father," she asked one morning, while they ate breakfast together, "why do humans need to eat food when I only need light?" Marcus smiled and passed her a piece of fruit that she would never taste but like to hold anyway, because our bodies are made of different stuff. He explained, "You are made of something like crystal and light, but I am made of meat and bone and stubbornness." Lyra giggled, and the sound was like wind chimes singing. "I like that you are made of stubbornness," she said. "It is my favorite part of you." Marcus taught her everything he knew, and many things he had to learn along the way. He taught her human history, starting from the caves and moving through all the wars and wonders that had brought humanity to the stars. Lyra wept when he told her about the great disasters, the wars that killed millions, the cruelty that humans had shown to each other. "How did you survive?" she asked with tears like liquid crystal running down her face. "How did you not destroy yourselves?" Marcus thought about the question for a long time before answering. "Because we also loved," he said finally. "For every terrible thing we did, there was someone who chose kindness instead. Someone who helped a stranger, someone who died so others could live." He showed her art and music and literature from Earth. She fell in love with Shakespeare and spent weeks reading his plays out loud in Voices she made up for each character Romeo and Juliet made her cry for 3 days straight. "It is so beautiful and so terrible," she said, holding the book like it was something precious. They loved each other so much that they died for it. Is that what love is supposed to be? Love is not supposed to be any one thing, Marcus told her gently. Love is whatever two people make it, and sometimes it ends in tragedy. But sometimes it ends in growing old together and watching sunsets and being grateful for every moment. Which kind will I have? Lyra asked. Marcus pulled her into a hug, even though her crystalline body was harder than human flesh. Whichever kind you choose, he said. That is the wonderful thing about love. It belongs to you. He taught her ethics and philosophy, and the complicated question of right and wrong. The Volanthi believed in pure logic, in decisions made without emotion, in sacrifice of the individual for the good of the whole. Marcus taught her something different. Every life matters, he said one night as they watched the stars through the station window. Not because of what they can do or produce, but because they exist, because they feel, because somewhere in the universe they are the most important person to someone else. Lyra pressed her hand against the glass, and her glow reflected in the darkness. My people would say that is inefficient, she said quietly. Your people forgot something important. Marcus replied. They forgot that efficiency is not the same as meaning. You can build the most perfect machine in the universe, but if it cannot love or be loved, what is the point? She turned to look at him with those eyes that held galaxies. Father, why do the Volanthi fear feeling? Is it not the most beautiful thing? Marcus considered his words carefully because this was important. Your people live for a very long time, he said. Hundreds of years, sometimes thousands. And I think somewhere along the way they learn to protect themselves from loss. If you do not love, you cannot grieve. Lyra was quiet for a moment. That sounds like a half-life, she said finally. Like refusing to see the sun because you fear. The night that follows, Marcus felt his heart swell with pride because that was exactly right. That is a very human thing too. Say, he told her. Lyra smiled and her whole body brightened. Good, she said. I want to be human like you. The days passed into weeks and the weeks into years, and Marcus watched his daughter grow into something incredible. Her powers developed in ways that scared him. Sometimes she could move things with her mind and feel emotions from across the room, and once she accidentally shattered every piece of glass in the station because she had a nightmare, but she was also kind and gentle, and she cried. When she hurt things by accident, I did not mean to. She sobbed after the glass incident. I do not want to be dangerous. Marcus held her and stroked her crystalline hair. Being powerful does not make you dangerous, he said. Being cruel makes you dangerous. And you are the least cruel person I have ever known. What if they are right? She whispered. What if I am an aberration? What if there is something wrong with me? Marcus pulled back and looked her in the eyes. Listen to me, Lyra. There is nothing wrong with you. You feel things deeply, and that makes you different. But different is not wrong. Different is just another way of being right. She nodded slowly, and her glow stabilized. I love you, Father. I love you too, little star. They were happy in their hidden corner of the universe. But happiness was not meant to last. The scouts found them on a cold morning. When Lyra was practicing her abilities in the courtyard, 3 Volanthi ships appeared in the sky like predators who had finally found their prey. Marcus grabbed his weapon and stood in front of his daughter. Stay behind me, he ordered. No, Lyra said, and her voice had steel in it that he had never heard before. I will not let them hurt you. Lyra, you cannot fight them all. She stepped forward, and her body began to glow brighter than the sun. Watch me, she said. The power that poured out of her was terrifying and beautiful. A wave of force that knocked the first ship from the sky and sent the others spinning, but there were too many and they kept coming. In the end, they were surrounded and captured and dragged onto a ship heading for the heart of the Empire. Marcus looked at his daughter in chains and felt his heart breaking. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have protected you." Lyra reached out and took his hand despite the guards shouting at her. "You did protect me," she said. "You gave me something worth protecting, and that is more than anyone else ever could." The ship carried them toward the Emperor, who had murdered her mother, toward a court that had spent years wanting her dead, toward a destiny that neither of them could have imagined, but they faced it together because that was what family did. The imperial court of the Volanthi was the most beautiful and terrible place Marcus had ever seen. It was a cathedral made of living crystal that had grown over millions of years, reaching toward the sky like frozen fingers trying to touch the heavens. Light moved through the walls in patterns that hurt his human eyes, and the silence was so deep that he could hear his own heartbeat echoing. 10,000 Volanthi nobles stood in perfect rows, their crystalline bodies refracting light into cold rainbows that had no warmth in them. They did not move or speak or breathe. They simply watched with eyes that held no emotion, no curiosity, no mercy. At the far end of the court sat the throne of silence, a massive structure carved from a single black crystal that seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it. And upon that throne sat Emperor Kithan, brother of the murdered empress, uncle of the princes he had ordered killed. He was tall and sharp and terrible, his body a deep blue that seemed almost black in the strange light. When he looked at Marcus and Lyra, there was nothing in his eyes but cold calculation. Marcus stood in chains with blood still drying on his face from the beating the guards had given him when he tried to fight back. His body hurt in a dozen different places, but he refused to bow his head. Beside him, Lyra was bound in devices that glowed with dark light, suppressors designed to contain her powers, but even restrained, even captured, she stood tall with her chin raised and her eyes defiant. She looked like her mother. Marcus realized she looked like a queen. "So," Emperor Kithan said, and his voice echoed through the court like ice cracking, "the aberration lives." The word rippled through the assembled nobles like a stone thrown into still water. Aberration, it was not just a description, it was a death sentence. "Look at her," Kithan continued, gesturing with one sharp hand. "She glows with colors that should not exist in our kind. She has been corrupted by human contamination. She is an insult to everything we have built." Marcus felt rage building in his chest. "She is your niece," he said loudly. The court gasped. No one interrupted the emperor. No one spoke without permission in this place of silence and fear. But Marcus was human, and humans had never been very good at following rules. They did not agree with Kithan. Turned his cold gaze on the small human who dared to speak. "You will be silent, creature. She is your blood," Marcus continued, ignoring the guards who moved toward him with weapons raised. "She is your sister's daughter, the last piece of Sithara that exists in this universe. And you want to destroy her because she makes you uncomfortable. She is a mutation," Kithan said, and there was something almost like anger in his voice now. A mistake that should have been corrected before it drew breath. "She is evolution." Marcus shot back. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Evolution. The Volanthi believed themselves to be the perfect species, the end result of millions of years of development. They had not changed in thousands of centuries because they believed there was nothing left to improve. And here was a human, a creature they considered barely more than an animal, telling them they were wrong. Her mother knew the truth, Marcus said. And now he was speaking not just to the emperor, but to every noble in the court. Sithar saw that Lyra was not wrong. She was new. She was different. She was the next step in what your species could become. My sister was weak, Kithan snarled. She let emotion cloud her judgment and killed her. You killed her, Lyra spoke for the first time, and her voice rang through the crystal court like a bell. You sent assassins to murder your own sister because she threatened your power. Kithan rose from his throne, and the air seemed to freeze around him. Be silent. Aberration. My name is Lyra, she said, and somehow her voice grew stronger even as the suppressors tried to contain her. My mother named me for a human constellation because she knew that even in the darkest night, stars can shine. Your mother was a fool. My mother was brave, Lyra replied. She was kind and loving, and everything you pretend does not matter. And she died protecting me because that is what love does. The court was utterly silent now, every eye fixed on the strange princess who spoke of love and mothers and things that the Volanti had not discussed in millennia. Kithan descended from his throne. Walking slowly toward them, you speak of love as if it has value, he said. But love is weakness, emotion is inefficiency. Feeling is the enemy of reason. Then you understand nothing. Marcus said quietly. The Emperor stopped directly in front of him. Towering over the small human who refused to look away, I understand everything, Kithan said. I understand that you are a primitive creature from a primitive world. I understand that you somehow convinced my sister to give you her greatest shame. And I understand that you will die today. Maybe, Marcus agreed. But I also understand something you never will. And what is that? Marcus smiled. And it was the smile of a man who had nothing left to lose. I understand why she chose me, he said. Not a Volanti noble or a military commander or anyone with power or influence. She chose a human because she knew that humans would do something your kind forgot how to do. And what is that? We would love her, Marcus said simply. We would raise her and teach her and fight for her and die for her. Not because it made logical sense, but because that is what parents do. He looked at Lyra with all the love in his human heart visible in his eyes. I raised your heir, he said to the Emperor. I taught her everything I know about kindness and courage and the value of every life. And I would do it again 1,000 times over because she is my daughter, and I love her. The court held its breath. 10,000 ancient beings who had forgotten what emotion felt like, who had suppressed their hearts for millennia, who had been taught that feeling was weakness, and here was a human, fragile and temporary and absolutely certain. Speaking of love like it was the most powerful force in the universe, Kithan raised his hand. The sentence is death for the human, and purification for the aberration. Purification. Marcus knew what that meant. They would cut away the parts of Lyra that felt, that loved, that made her who she was. They would leave her empty and cold and perfect. They would kill his daughter without ending her life. Something broke inside Lyra at those words. The suppressors on her body began to crack. Light poured out of the fractures, warm and golden and fierce. No, she said, and the word carried power that shook the crystal walls. The suppressors shattered. Lyra rose into the air, her body blazing like a star, her power finally free. The guards raised their weapons, but she did not attack them. Instead, she did something that no Volanti had done in 10,000 years. She opened her heart and shared it with everyone in the court. Every memory of Marcus teaching her to read, every moment of laughter and love, every time he chose her over his own safety, every lesson about kindness and courage and the value of feeling, every single second of the human love that had raised an alien princess into something new. The memories poured into 10,000 minds that had forgotten what warmth felt like, and the court of cold stars began to weep. The Volanti nobles did not know what was happening to them. They had spent centuries, some of them millennia, building walls around their hearts and silencing any whisper of emotion that tried to break through. They had been taught from birth that feeling was dangerous, that attachment was weakness, that the path to perfection lay in cold and careful logic, And now those walls were crumbling. The memories that Lyra shared were not violent or aggressive. They were simply true, a human man kneeling in wreckage, making a promise to a dying stranger, an egg being held against a warm chest. While gentle words were spoken in the darkness, a child saying her first word, and a father crying tears of joy, years of patience and teaching and unconditional love poured into a being that the universe said should not exist. Some nobles fell too. Their knees as feelings they had forgotten crashed over them like waves. Others stood frozen, their crystalline faces twisted in expressions they did not recognize because they had never worn them before. A few began to weep, and the tears that fell from their eyes were the first their kind had shed in 10,000 years. Emperor Kithan stood alone in the chaos, his body shaking with something he refused to name. "What have you done?" he snarled at Lyra, his voice cracking. Lyra floated down to the ground, her glow softening but not fading, and she looked at her uncle with eyes that held no hatred, only sadness, only pity. "I showed them what you tried to kill in me," she said gently. "What you killed in yourself so long ago that you forgot it ever existed. Emotion is weakness," Kithan repeated. But the words sounded hollow now. "Feeling leads to destruction. Feeling leads to meaning," Marcus said, stepping forward despite his chains. "It leads to connection and love and all the things that make life worth living." The guards did not try to stop him. They were too busy dealing with the storm inside their own minds. The unfamiliar sensations of joy and grief and wonder that Lyra had awakened in them. "You think your empire is strong because it feels nothing," Marcus continued. "But you are wrong. You are brittle. You are hollow. You are a beautiful structure with nothing inside worth protecting. How dare you?" Kithan started. "Mother loved you once." Lyra's words cut through the air like a blade. Kithan went still. "I saw it in her memories." Lyra continued. "When I was inside the egg, when she was still alive, I felt everything she felt. And I know that she loved her little brother." Something flickered in the Emperor's cold eyes. "She remembered teaching you to make light patterns when you were young," Lyra said. "She remembered how you used to ask her to tell you stories about the ancient heroes. She remembered the day you told her you were afraid of being alone." "Stop," Kithan whispered. "She never stopped loving you," Lyra said. "Even when you changed, even when you became cold and cruel and hungry for power. Even at the end when she knew you had sent assassins to kill her. I said stop. Her last thought was of you. Not as the monster you became, but as the little brother who used to hold her hand during storms." Kithan screamed, and it was a sound of pure anguish that shook the crystal walls. The nobles watched in horror and wonder as their emperor, their perfect and emotionless ruler, fell to his knees with his hands pressed against his head. "What have you done to me?" he gasped. "What is this feeling?" "It is grief," Marcus said quietly. "It is the price of love that was lost and the weight of choices that cannot be undone." "I do not want it," Kithan sobbed. "Take it away. Make it stop." "I cannot," Lyra said, kneeling before him, "and I would not even if I could. Because this pain you feel is proof that you are still alive. That somewhere inside the monster there is still the brother my mother loved." The court watched in silence as the aberration. Princes knelt before the emperor, who had wanted her dead. They watched as she took his hands in hers despite everything he had done. They watched as she showed him mercy he did not deserve. "This is what humans taught me," Lyra said to the assembled nobles. "Not that feeling is weakness, but that the willingness to feel in spite of pain is the greatest strength of all." "They are so fragile," one noble said, a voice trembling with new emotion. "They live such short lives and lose so much. How do they survive it?" Marcus turned to face her. "We survive because we have each other," he said. "We survive because when one of us falls, others reach down to help them up. We survive because love is stronger than loss, even when it does not feel that way." Connection makes us strong, another noble whispered. Not weak. Yes, Marcus said. That is the secret that your kind forgot. That is what Sithara saw in humanity and wanted for her daughter. The court was changing. Before his eyes, nobles who had been enemies for centuries were looking at each other with new, understanding families who had not spoken in generations were reaching out tentative hands. The cold light of the crystal cathedral seemed warmer somehow, touched by the golden glow that still emanated from Lyra, but not everyone welcomed the change. Ektham rose to his feet, his face twisted with rage and grief, and 1,000 emotions he did not know how to handle. You think you have won, he said to Marcus. You think that making us feel again is some kind of victory. I think it is a beginning, Marcus replied. It is nothing, Kithan snarled. It is chaos and weakness, and it will destroy us. And it is all because of you. He lunged forward, his claws extended, aiming for Marcus's throat. If I remove the source of the infection, he screamed, perhaps we can still be saved. Marcus saw death coming and knew he could not dodge. I closed his eyes and thought of Lyra, of the day she was born, of every precious moment they had shared. He did not regret any of it. But the blow never came. He opened his eyes and saw Lyra standing between him and the Emperor, her body pierced by claws that had been meant for him. No, Marcus screamed, catching her as she fell. Her crystalline form was cracked, and her light was flickering like a candle in the wind, but she was smiling. It is okay, Father, she whispered. You protected me when I was small. Now it is my turn to protect you. Why did you do that? Marcus sobbed, pressing his hands against her wounds as if he could hold her together through sheer force of will. Because that is what love does, she said. You taught me that. Remember, the court watched in horror as the princess who had given them back their hearts lay, dying in a human's arms, and Emperor Kethan stood frozen, staring at his own claws, at the blood that was warm instead of cold, at the niece he had just murdered the same way he had murdered her mother. What have I done? He whispered. The weight of feeling crashed over him like a mountain falling from the sky, and for the first time in centuries, the Emperor of the Volanthi Dominion understood what he had become and what he had destroyed. Marcus held his daughter as her light faded, and nothing else in the universe mattered. The court of 10,000 nobles, the crystal cathedral that had stood for millions of years, the Emperor who had caused all of this. None of it existed in that moment. There was only Lyra, broken and beautiful in his arms, her crystalline form cracking like ice in spring. Stay with me, Marcus begged, his tears falling on her face. Please, little star. Stay with me. Lyra reached up with a trembling hand and touched his cheek. Father, she said softly, do you remember what you told me about death? Marcus could barely speak through his grief, but he nodded. You said it was not the end, Lyra continued. You said it was just the night after the sun, and that the sun always rises. I did not mean for you, Marcus sobbed. I did not mean so soon. You were supposed to have centuries. You were supposed to outlive me by generations. Time does not measure love, Lyra said. You taught me that too. A moment of true connection is worth more than millennia of emptiness. Her glow flickered again. Weaker now, I am not afraid, she whispered. Because of you, I am not afraid of anything. Marcus held her tighter, as if he could keep her soul in her body through sheer force of will around them. The court had fallen silent. 10,000 beings watched with hearts that had just learned to feel again. And they felt this. The raw, terrible pain of loss that they had spent so long running from Emperor Kithan stood apart from them all. His claws still covered in his niece's blood. His face a mask of horror and grief and guilt. He had done this. He had destroyed the last piece of his sister. He had murdered love twice. Please, Marcus whispered, speaking now not to Lyra, but to anything that might be listening. Please, I will give anything. I will do anything. Just do not take her from me. It was not a prayer, because Marcus had never been much for religion. It was something deeper. It was the desperate cry of a parent watching their child die, and something answered. The Volanthi had an ancient legend about the resonance, the psychic network that connected all of their kind across the stars. It had been created at the dawn of their civilization, a web of minds designed to share knowledge and wisdom across the vast distances of space. But over the millennia, as the Volanthi suppressed their emotions and retreated into cold logic, the resonance had gone quiet. It had become nothing more than a tool for transmitting data. Empty of feeling, empty of meaning, empty until now the resonance woke up. It started as a hum, low and deep, vibrating through the crystal walls of the court. Then it grew louder, stronger, spreading outward like ripples in a pond that stretched across the entire empire. Every Volanthi on every world felt it at the same moment, a warmth that had been missing for 10,000 years, a connection that went beyond mere thought, a love that would not let death have the final word. The energy poured through the court, golden and pink and every color that Lyra had carried in her crystalline form. It gathered around her broken body like a cocoon of light, and then it spoke. The voice was not quite Marcus's mother singing lullabies on warm summer nights. It was not quite Empress Cythera's last whisper as she handed her daughter to a stranger. It was not quite the collective memory of every act of love ever performed in the history of the universe, but it was somehow all of those things at once. Tai Chai's is what you forgot, the voice said to the Volanthi. This is what they remembered. This is what she gave you, Bace. The light intensified until even Marcus had to close his eyes when he opened them again. Lyra was looking at him, not dying, not fading, but blazing brighter than she ever had before. The cracks in her body had healed, filled in with golden light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Her eyes held galaxies that were warm instead of cold. Father, she said, and her voice echoed with power that shook the foundations of the court. I understand now. I am not an aberration. I am a bridge. She rose into the air, her form radiating energy that washed over everyone present. The resonance was never meant to be empty, she continued. It was meant to carry love across the stars, to remind us that we are never alone no matter how far apart we are. The nobles felt it, the connection that bound them together in a way that logic never could. They felt each other's joy and sorrow and hope and fear. They felt the weight of millennia of isolation lifting from their shoulders. They felt alive in a way they had forgotten was possible. I am the resonant one, Lyra said, and there was no pride in her voice, only acceptance. Not because of prophecy or destiny, but because a human taught me that feeling is not weakness. She floated back down to stand beside Marcus, and she took his hand, because my father loved me when no one else would. The court fell to their knees, not in fear, but in recognition. They were not kneeling to a princess or an empress. They were kneeling to something they had lost and finally found again. The empress and her father. Someone said, "The crown and the heart." The crown and the heart, others echoed, until the words rang through the crystal cathedral like a song. Emperor Keithan stood alone in the sea of kneeling figures, his face wet with tears he did not know how to shed. What happens now? He asked. His voice broken. Lyra looked at him with eyes that held no hatred. You have a choice, she said. You can hold on to the cold and the cruelty, or you can let yourself feel again, even though it hurts, even though you do not deserve forgiveness. Your mother, Keithan started, is gone, Lyra said, and nothing can bring her back. But you can honor her memory by becoming the brother she believed you could be. She held out her hand to him. The choice is yours. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Emperor Keithan fell to his knees and wept like a child who had finally come home after being lost for a very long time. He took Lyra's hand, and the resonance wrapped around him too. Painful and healing and full of all the things he had spent centuries running from when it was over. He rose and removed the crown from his head. "I am not worthy of this," he said. "I never was." He placed it at Lyra's feet. "The throne is yours," he said. "If you want it." Lyra looked at Marcus. "What do you think, father?" Marcus smiled through his tears. "I think that is your choice to make, little star." It always was. Lyra picked up the crown and looked at it for a long moment. Then she handed it to one of the elder nobles. "I do not want to be an empress," she said. "I want to be a bridge. I want to help all species understand what humans taught me." She turned back to Marcus. "And I want to be with my father for however long we have." Marcus felt his heart overflow. "Lyra, I am just a human. I will grow old and die long before you. You should be with your people." "You are my people," Lyra said simply. "You are my family, and home is not a place. Home is wherever you are." She hugged him, and her body was warm against his. "Besides," she whispered, "the resonance showed me something. Humans who are connected to it live longer. Much longer. Something about the energy. Extending cellular regeneration." Marcus pulled back and stared at her. "How?" "Much longer." Lyra smiled. "Long enough." The years that followed changed everything. The Volanti Empire opened its doors to humanity and all the other young species they had dismissed. They built wonders together that neither could have imagined alone, and through it all, the story spread a human who crashed on an alien world, a promise made to a dying mother, a child who called him father, and the moment when the whole court held its breath and discovered that love was the most powerful force in the universe. Centuries later, scholars would still argue about what really happened that day, but the Volanti knew the truth. It was not the prophecy or the resonance or any grand destiny. It was something much simpler. It was a father's love, and that made all the difference. On a balcony overlooking the stars, Marcus stood with his daughter and watched the lights of 1,000 ships traveling between worlds that had learned to feel again. "Are you happy, father?" Lyra asked. Marcus thought about everything they had been through. The crash, the promise, the hidden years, the terror of the court, the miracle of her survival. He thought about all the time they still had ahead of them. "Yes, little star," he said, pulling her close. "I am home." And somewhere in the resonance that now sang with warmth across the galaxy, the spirit of Empress Ithara smiled. Her daughter was loved, her legacy lived on, and humanity had taught the universe something it would never forget. Love is not weakness, love is how you win.